Hello everyone and welcome to a most interesting game from yesterday's round 2 of the Superbet Romania Chess Classic, Gukesh versus Praggnanandhaa. They both played in the FIDE Candidates tournament. Of course, you know that Gukesh won the FIDE Candidates tournament with some 9 points, I believe. And Pragg was in the bottom half of the playing field. He finished in 5th place with 7 points. But I mean, it's one event. You could play really well and you could play reasonably well. You could play badly, but he did finish. Okay, Pragg did finish ahead of Alireza, ahead of Vidit, and ahead of Nijad Abbasov, but Gukesh had the best tournament of his life. And like I said, no one gave them any chances. Everyone was always going to be Nepo, it's going to be Fabi. No, it is Gukesh who will challenge Dingleren for the title of world champion. But even though these are absolutely incredible players, both of them, you've seen many of their games, you know what they're capable of. They're capable of taking down absolutely anyone, including Magnus Carlsen. It seems that there is this thing called the endgame, the opposition of the kings in the endgame, which everyone knows. Everyone knows it's easy. Everyone knows it's completely elementary. But even at this level, it can easily be overlooked. So let's check it out. It's Gukesh versus Pragg. Their head-to-head score, if you guys are interested, Gukesh won 3 classical games against Pragg. Pragg won 2 classical games against Gukesh, and 4 of the games they've drawn. And yeah, let's see what happens in this one. Gukesh opens with pawn to d4. Knight to f6 by Pragg, c4 e6, pawn to g3. Gukesh goes for the Catalan opening. We have pawn to d5, bishop to g2, and now d captures on c4. We have knight to f3 and bishop to b4 check. So this is the close Catalan. Played many times, nothing new being played here. Bishop to d2, a5, and a3. We have bishop captures on d2, knight captures, and pawn to b5. For the moment, Pragg enjoying an extra pawn. Pawn to b3 and c captures on b3. Queen captures and pawn to c6 now. So if you look at it, Pragg will at some point have the option of maybe creating a pass pawn on the queen side, but White has, or rather Gukesh has this monster Catalan bishop, and he's up in development. We have castles by both of them. Queen back to b2. And now knight b to d7. We have rook f to c1, and there are a couple of games that reach this position. Bishop to a6 is a known move, also queen to b6 is a known move, but here we have bishop to b7, and it is now as of move 13 that we have a completely new game. And if you look at the time on the clocks, Gukesh spent less than a minute reaching this position. Okay, Pragg did spend a few minutes, but I mean, they're just blitzing this out. So, okay, knight to e1. You can see that Gukesh doesn't waste time on this one. And pawn to e5. The c6 pawn is hanging, but Pragg obviously prepared something very nice for Gukesh. He plays pawn to e5, and now the question is, can the c6 pawn be captured? Okay, let's see what Pragg prepared. If you capture the pawn on c6, then bishop captures, rook captures, and now rook to b8, defending the pawn on b5, and once you capture on e5, let's say knight captures, attacks the rook, let's say rook c5, knight to g6, and you get this position. Okay, Pragg gives the pawn back, as you usually do against the Catalan, to sort of minimize the lead in development, and will have the opportunity of creating a pass pawn on the queen side at some point. But Gukesh does not go for it, and he does invest some time in this move. You can see that it's hour 59 and now hour 51. Some 18 minutes for this d captures on e5 move. Okay, knight captures on e5. Seems like he's blundering a knight, but not really. Gukesh's knight is also hanging on d2. So we do have a trade, captures, and now rook to d1. The queen has to go to h6. It is the only square. Queen to c7. Gukesh nicely infiltrates with the queen, but Pragg just nicely plays rook f to b8, and he will kick away the queen with some knight to d5 action. So knight to d3 and immediate knight to d5, where you could capture, but then you give up your Catalan bishop, and of course you know from experience that once you do this, you're not really playing for the win anymore. So queen to e5, getting the queen out of harm's way, and rook to e8. Now Pragg goes after Gukesh's queen, queen back to b2, and queen to d6. Pragg centralizes the queen, and he's dreaming of playing c5. If he can execute c5 and free up his own light square bishop, then it's no longer a question of whether Gukesh is playing for a win. It's already a question of whether Pragg is playing for a win. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but yeah, if c5 happens, this is the only weakness in Pragg's position. Once you defend b5, of course, yeah, that's pretty much it. So rook a to c1, keeping an eye on that c5 square, queen to e7, attacking the e2 pawn, and now knight to c5, blockading the position with the knight, going after the bishop, bishop to c8, and now pawn to e3. And Pragg goes for pawn to b4. He says, all right, you can have your pawn back, but at the price of a bishop. You remove the defender of the b4 square, and then you can capture here. You're going to win the pawn back, but you have to give up your Catalan bishop. And there is no... Well, you could play rook to d4. It is the top engine move, and then go for some h4 ideas, h5, rook to g4, maybe if the bishop moves, but... yeah, it's maybe a little bit too ambitious, but it is the top engine move, so maybe it's not too ambitious. However, Gukesh does play bishop captures on d5, c captures, and now a captures on b4. He grabs his pawn back, and now the material is again even. We have bishop to e6 and queen to d4. You don't have to think twice before you centralize your queen. It's always a good move. Rook a to, sorry, not rook a to d8, rook e to d8, and now knight back to d3. We have pawn to h6 and knight to f4. We have bishop to g4 attacking the rook, and now rook to d2. So you can see what's happening. It's equal material, bishop versus knight, Gukesh with the light square weaknesses, and Pragg with the perhaps a strong d5 pawn, but also perhaps a weak d5 pawn, plays bishop to f3. The pawn is now nicely defended, or rather it seems like you can capture it because it's sufficiently defended, but I mean the queen is defending, so not really. So rook d to c2, doubling up on the c file, and now queen to d7, preparing to play queen h3 should the knight move, but there is just enough time to remaneuver the knight to go to a more defensive square. So knight to d3, queen to h3, Pragg threatens checkmate now, and knight to e1. We have bishop to e4, nicely controlling the knight here, and also paralyzing it. If the knight ever moves, it's going to be queen to g2 checkmate. So now perhaps Pragg can play something like h5, h4, open up the position, maybe bring the rook into the game. Who knows? Rook to d2. Okay. What is happening here now? We have queen to h5. His rook is attacked, and he wants to play pawn to f3. So Pragg stops it, and now we have queen to c5. Interestingly, you can play pawn to f3. It's a very nice line, and it is a classical game, so I will show it to you. I feel obligated to show it to you. For example, f3. You capture here, captures, captures, and captures, and now rook to f1. Queen to e4, you offer a queen trade, captures, captures, the rook captures with check, rook captures, and okay, you go after the pawn. Rook to e8, defending at g4, stopping f5, and you're down a pawn, but it's a rook and pawn endgame. Yeah, okay, you hold this to a draw. If you can play well. But here we have queen to c5, and now rook to d7. We have rook d to c1, and now rook d to a7, doubling up on the a file, pawn to f3 now. Now the sacrifice happens, but rook to a5 first, going after the queen, queen to d4, and only now Pragg captures the pawn on f3. Knight captures, queen captures, and now queen to f4. Gukesh just offers a queen trade. Queen to h5, Pragg declines, and now pawn to e4. And what do you do here? It's a very, very tricky position where you know that if you capture, a check will occur on d8, and then queen will capture here also with check. So you have to calculate what happens in all of these lines, and you could advance the pawn to d4, maybe to stop the rooks a little bit, but it doesn't really do all that much. So d captures on e4, and now we have rook to d8 with check, rook captures, king to h7, and queen captures on e4 with check. Pawn to g6, and just a rook back to d2 to control the second rank, making sure that you don't get checkmated. And okay, Pragg is up a pawn, but yeah, it's not gonna be possible to win this. We have queen to h3, now with ideas of rook to a1 check, so queen to a1, stopping that. We have queen back to c8, and now rook to f2. So while the position is drawn, you can see that both players are very, very low on time. 1 minute for Gukesh, 2 minutes for Pragg. Queen to c5. Okay, what is happening here? You are pinning the rook, not allowing rook captures on f7. So king to g2, and we have a few checks. Queen c6 check, king g1, and again a pin. Queen to b6, king f1, queen e6 check, queen e2 blocking, and queen to b7, and not pinning but defending on f7. We have queen to f3. Here, Gukesh is under a minute, and he plays this queen to f3 move. He played it with 14 seconds on the clock, as there is a 30 seconds increment. But the queen trade, although it should be possible here, I mean, it's only one pawn, is the losing move for the World Chess Championship challenger. Feel free to pause the video and figure out why while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on being a true master of the endgame, as you study it every day, no doubt, of course, even before breakfast. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is queen captures on f3. And why is the queen trade winning? Aren't all rook endgames drawn? Yes, rook endgames are drawn, but not pawn endgames. Rook to f5, forcing a rook trade. And now Gukesh is in big trouble. Rook captures on f5, g captures, king to f2, king to g6, and now king to f3. We have king to g5, and now pawn to h3, and there is a way to win this. More than one, but you have to be precise. Feel free to pause the video and win the game for Pragg while I give you a couple of seconds. Of course, all of you found it, as you are, comfortable in your own homes. You have all the time in the world, and you practice endgames every day. But Pragg missed it. First, Gukesh missed that the endgame was completely lost for him, and then Pragg missed the win. And it's very hard to imagine. It's not that there's one winning move, there are two of them. Point being that h5 is winning here. But you could also beat around the bush with a king to g6. One thing you cannot do is king to f6, and that's exactly what Pragg played. I'm going to show you why h5, for example. Okay, you stop g4, that's one. But after h4 with check, king to g6, and king f4, it is the black king that gets the opposition. King f6, and now you just bully the white king. In endgames, opposition is everything. King to f3, now I go king e5. And now after king to e3, it seems like white gets the opposition, but you have a move to waste. You can play f6, but also f4 check also works. G captures king f5. King f3, white gets the opposition, but you again waste the move. So that's the point. You either gain the opposition, or you should have moves to waste in order to break your opponent's opposition. King to g3, now comes king to e4. Of course, you cannot gain the opposition here, so king to g2, now king captures on f4, and that's it. You're gonna, and now it's 2 versus 1, of course, completely winning. You can simply move the king and advance this pawn to victory, or if the white king blocks, then you go here and pick up this pawn, then you have 2 extra pawns, of course, completely winning. And another thing, after h3, you could also play king to g6, which is, like I said, beating around the bush, but point being that after king f4, you still have the opposition. King f6, and after pawn to g4, you play king g6, and after g captures on f5, you play king h5, or any of the moves. If pawn to f6, you don't care, you just play king h4, and the white king can never reach the black pawns. You just capture this one and advance your pawn to victory. So that's the problem. However, Pragg played king to f6. He spent almost all of his time on it. He played it with some 30 seconds on the clock, but now it is Gukesh who gains the opposition. King to f4, we have king to e6, and now pawn to g4. And now the problem is, if you regain opposition, there's g captures on f5, but now it's black to move. That's the problem. King to e7, okay, king e5, white gets the opposition. Pawn to f6 check, no problem, king d5. You'll play king d7, but there's no way to advance further. The pawn covers this. If you go, let's say, king to c5, Pragg cannot reach the pawn. You have to go king to c7. King to e7 does not work. King to e7 loses. So instead, at g4, f captures on g4, h captures, and king to f6, seemingly gains gaining the opposition, but it is not enough. King to f3, king to e5. You cannot gain the opposition further. King to e5, king to e3, gaining the opposition. King d5, king d3, keeping the opposition. King to d6, king to d4, king to e6, and king to e4. Just keeping the opposition, that's all there is to it. King f6, king to f4, king to g6, and now okay, you don't have the opposition, but king f3, king to g7, trying to confuse Gukesh a little bit, but king to e4. King to f6, we have king to f4, gaining the opposition, and king to g6. King to f3, king to g5, and now king to g3. We have pawn to f6, but king to f3. King h4, king to f4, and now king to h3. And now if you go king f5 and try to be greedy about it, you're going to lose the game, because after this, there's king g3. Now there's nothing better than to capture, and once you capture, this pawn is now unstoppable. King g6, pawn to h5, and so on. So after king h3, king to f3 was played, king to h2, king to f2, and here the players just played a few more moves, and it was the best kind of draw, of course, a draw by insufficient material. So yeah, I mean, incredible stuff that two players, who played in the FIDE Candidates tournament. First, Gukesh misses that this is an elementary, it's not a rook and pawn endgame. It's a king and pawn endgame that's dead lost for him. And then Prag, doesn't manage to win it. It's probably because it's a classical game, and then you get into time trouble. But I'm pretty sure that if two of them played a blitz game, a 3-minute per player, and they reached this position with a couple of seconds on the clock, like with a 1 second increment, that they would play it to perfection. It's sometimes weird like that. But yeah, what are you gonna do? It happens to the I would say the best of us, but I cannot include myself, so it happens to the best of them. And here it happened to Gukesh and also to Prag. We're gonna check out the standings after round 3 has been played, as all of the games from round 2 have been drawn. That's why we've had the time to check out Anand's great victory against Apollo. If you haven't seen it, it's my previous video. We'll also put a link in the description below. You can, enjoy that one. It's really a nice game. So that's the game. Hope you enjoyed it. Tough break for both of them, but again, a fair result, one could say. I would like to thank Benjamin Nethercott, Marcus Grebel, Samuel Kane, Tamim Hamidi, and James Eugene Cashman for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.